My name is Daria Belova, and today I would like to present you our experimental research on subject-object subextraction asymmetry in Russian language. What is a subject-object asymmetry, or in other terminology, a subject island? The island properties of subjects in comparison with objects were firstly described by Ross as a sentential subject island constraint. It means that any element within a sentential subject cannot be moved out of it with WH movement or relativization, as you can see in English in example 1b. Later, this constraint was expanded firstly by Chomsky and secondly by Huang. The last one, expansion, is formulated as a condition on extraction domain. It says that only a complement position is transparent to subextraction. Here you can see that not only a sentential subject shows its island properties, but also simple subjects too. However, subject islands are found not to be not at all uniform cross-linguistically and within one language. So the differences between subject islands led to more theoretical approaches. We focused on three of them. The first one is called the Friesen approach, the Friesen theory, that says that a constituent becomes opaque to subextraction after it has been moved out of its deriving position. The second one is discourse-related. It's called topic opacity. Only focus position is transparent to subextraction. And the third one is CED, conditional on extraction domain, that was mentioned above, that only complement position is transparent. So, among all the factors that are known to influence the island degree, we can mention the verbal structure type, that unaccusative, unergative, and transitive subjects can behave differently, the information structure, the movement distance, and the movement type. All four of them, as we know, are rarely investigated in one research, if ever. So we will focus on the first and second one. The fact of the verbal structure is interesting because different types of structure, verbal structure, are modeled to have different subject deriving positions. So the SED approach can predict that they will behave differently. Polinsky at Alia were the first to experimentally test the influence of a verbal structure and the position of a subject or object NP to its island properties. They investigated Russian and English dependent clauses. However, the movement distance is also can be relevant to island properties. So we may suppose that NPs not in a dependent clause, but in a main clause, can also behave differently and show different degrees of opacity. And island properties of subjects of monopredicative or matching clauses in Russian have not been experimentally researched yet. So we decided to conduct our research to answer the following questions. First of all, how the acceptability of subextraction from structurally different subjects and an object depends on the position of the subextraction site with respect to the verb in a monopredicative clause. And second, are there any differences in island properties of monopredicative clause subjects and dependent clause subjects? And as we wanted to compare our results with the results of Polinsky, we decided to choose the two factors mentioned above, which means the verb structural type and the position of an NP undergoing subextraction. The experiment of Polinsky had three independent variables: NP type, which means the subject of an unaccusative, unergative, or transitive verb, and an object of a transitive verb. The second variable is topicality. Is the NP in question located in topic preverbal position or in focused postverbal position? And movement type, WH movement or scrambling. The results are following. Movement type did not show any statistical influence, and for each subject type, preverbal and postverbal positions have almost the same degree of transparency, but a preverbal object is much less transparent than a postverbal one, though. So the authors formulate the hierarchy. An unaccusative subject is the most transparent one. A transitive subject is, and a transitive subject is the most opaque one. And also, intransitive stimuli are rated higher than transitive ones in general. Thus, we have a baseline to our research. But there is one question that we have to investigate before we can conduct our own experiment. The Russian language has plus or minus 3 word order, but the basic and the most common one is SVO. All other word orders are possible and acceptable too, but they have a very specific information structure. So we can't be sure that in an experiment with different word orders without any additional context, these word orders wouldn't be less acceptable. So we should check if non-basic word orders worsen or not the ratings of stimuli without subextraction by themselves. For this purpose, we have conducted a pilot experiment before the main experiment. Both experiments shared the same lexicalizations and had the same stimuli structure. But in the pilot experiment, we used the sentences without subextraction, and in the main experiments, the sentences with subextraction. So in pilot experiment, there were 2 independent variables, verbal type and word order. There were 24 test sentences and 24 filler sentences in each experimental list. Fillers contain the grammatical and ungrammatical sentences, and ungrammatical sentences contains mistakes in subject-verb agreement or incoherence between a time adjunct and the verbal aspect. Here you can see a half of one experimental block with direct basic word orders. So it's SV to intransitive stimuli, SVO to transitive, and OVS as the second word order to transitive stimulus. So the respondents rate each stimulus on a Likert scale from 1 to 7. The results of respondents who rated more than 3 ungrammatical fillers more than 5 were excluded. After this, the Z-score transformation procedure was applied to each respondent's rating. The pilot experiment was completed by 103 Russian native speakers. The results that we obtained are the following. Both verb type and word order are statistically significant factors, and every non-basic word order is significantly worse than the basic SVO, even the second most often OVS that we'll have to use in our main experiment. So these results can serve a baseline to our main experiment too. The main experiment with subextraction also has 2 independent variables. It's NP type with 4 levels and NP position with 2 levels. As the movement type, we choose WH movement with the word che, whose WH particle takes the first place in each sentence and is followed by a time adverbial to separate the particle from the next element to avoid any possible misunderstandings. For example, the interpretation with the extraction of the whole subject NP instead of the subtraction of one element from the subject NP. Here you can see a half of an experimental block with XV position. There were also 24 test stimuli and 24 fillers. Ungrammatical fillers included a filled gap in the place of WH extraction. The procedure and the scale were the same as in the pilot experiment. And the main experiment was completed by 171 Russian native speakers. So we found out that both NP type and NP position are statistically significant factors. For every NP type, the preverbal position is more transparent than the postverbal position. And here on the left side of the plot, you can also see the ratings of grammatical and ungrammatical fillers. As you can see, all test stimuli are rated lower than the grammatical sentences, but still not as low as the absolutely ungrammatical. For the preverbal position, all subjects are equally transparent and rated higher than an object. For the postverbal position, there is statistically significant difference between every NP type, though the difference between transitive subject and object is marginal. And unaccusative subject is the most transparent, and both arguments of a transitive verb are the least transparent ones, though an object is a little higher than a subject. For the aim of our curiosity, we compared the results of two experiments. It is important to remark that we can't compare any numbers because the ratings in the two experiments are obtained from different respondents. And it would be incorrect to apply any statistical criteria to the mix of both experiments, but we can create a draft image, draft plot of the interaction. And you can see that these plots does not look exactly like what we would expect from analysis structures. For both intransitive stimuli with postverbal subject position, the subextraction is better than the sentences without subextraction. If there were an Allen construction, we would see a superadditivity effect. And also the cross-like plot of an object is quite unexpected too. So in compare with the results of Polinsky, there are some differences. First of all, in monopredicative clauses, two positions of NP differ heavily. The preverbal position is much more transparent to subextraction than the postverbal. This fact conflicts with both topic opacity and freezing approaches. It is unpredictable by topic opacity because the preverbal position in Russian is topic and the postverbal is focus. And it cannot also be predicted by a freezing effect because in Russian all subjects move from their deriving position to take the preverbal position to get case. So it's not obvious why they should show different degrees of opacity, as we saw in our experiment. And the same thing happens to the high transparency of an object in the preverbal position, which is also quite an interesting result. Also, there is a large differences in the hierarchies of transparency for postverbal position. An object in P stays in situ in a complement of VP, So it should be transparent from the point of view of both freezing approach and CED. But in our experiment, it shows the lowest degree of transparency. The obtained results are not consistent with predictions of the three presented approaches. Nevertheless, they support in general the hierarchy found in Polinsky. The unaccusative subextraction gets the highest ratings, and the subextraction from the transitive subjects get the lowest ones. Thus, our results suggest that the distance of movement is a relevant factor for Russian subject island properties, though it has to be to get the reliable conclusions. We must check this in the frame of one experiment with the same respondents. So, thank you. Now I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Daria. Anyone who wants to pose a question?
Should we just speak up?
Sure.
Okay. Sure.
William?
Yes. Really interesting talk. I wonder if you've thought at all about the phenomenon known as satiation or syntactic satiation. This is observation that for certain particular sentence types that are initially unacceptable, after doing some considerable number of judgments over, sometimes the judgment shifts towards greater acceptability. And one place where people have sometimes found satiation is on in English subject island extractions. That's why it comes to mind. So in fact, some studies have found greater satiability, if you will, when from a subject of an unaccusative verb as opposed to unergative or transitive verb. So it could be especially relevant to some of the issues that are discussed here. So I wondered if that had come up at all, or if you were familiar with that work.
No, thank you very much for your comments.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds really relevant. I will.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you'd like detailed references, just send me email. I'll be happy to provide more. Yeah, so leave it at that.
Okay, thank you very much.